Adrian Cole was running on fumes. It was 11:45 at night and his shift at the hotel didn't end until midnight. His feet ached, his back hurt, and he couldn't remember the last time he'd had a proper meal. A protein bar at lunch, maybe? Or was that yesterday? 24 years old and he felt ancient. Medical school was supposed to be his ticket to a better life, but right now it just felt like drowning in slow motion. Between lectures, study groups, and 3 different part-time jobs, he barely had time to breathe. His classmates talked about weekend trips and new cars. Adrian talked himself out of buying coffee because he needed that $3 for bus fare, but quitting wasn't an option. His mom worked 2 jobs just to keep their small apartment. His dad had died when Adrian was 16, leaving nothing but debt. Adrian had made a promise to himself back then. He'd break the cycle. He'd become someone his family could be proud of. The grand ballroom doors swung open and guests from some fancy charity event started filtering out. Adrian had stopped paying attention to these things. Rich people throwing parties calling it charity, going home to their comfortable lives. He'd seen it too many times to care anymore. He was restocking towels behind the front desk when he heard the commotion. Voices rising in panic, someone shouting to call 911. Adrian's body reacted before his brain caught up. He dropped everything and ran toward the crowd gathering near the lobby entrance. An elderly woman had collapsed. She was on the marble floor, conscious but clearly struggling. People stood around, her in their expensive clothes, looking worried but doing absolutely nothing. Someone had a phone out, probably filming. Another person was calling for help. But nobody was actually helping. Adrian pushed through and dropped to his knees beside her. "Ma'am, I'm Adrian. I'm a medical student. Can you hear me okay?" The woman's eyes found his, sharp eyes he noticed, alert and intelligent, not confused. "I can hear you," she said, her voice thin. "Just dizzy. Can't breathe right." Adrian checked her pulse at her wrist. Fast, but regular. He looked at her face, her color. "When did you eat last, do you remember?" She thought about it, seemed almost embarrassed. "Breakfast, I think. Maybe yesterday's dinner. I've been so busy." He almost laughed. This woman was wearing jewelry that probably cost more than his entire student loan debt, and she'd forgotten to eat. "The ambulance is coming," he assured her. "But I think your blood sugar crashed. Have you been drinking water today?" A small shake of her head. "That's your problem right there." Adrian looked up at the crowd of useless onlookers. Someone get orange juice and water. Now. A hotel staff member actually moved this time. Adrian kept the woman calm, made sure she was positioned right, loosened the scarf around her neck. Basic emergency care, nothing fancy. But sometimes basic was all you needed. "You're very good at this," the woman said quietly. "What did you say your name was?" "Adrian Cole." "Vivian Harper. Thank you, Adrian Cole." The paramedics showed up and took over. Vivian insisted she was fine, that hospitals were unnecessary, but they convinced her to at least get checked out. As they wheeled her toward the exit, she glanced back at him. "I won't forget this kindness," she said. Adrian just nodded. He went back to his shift, finished out the last 15 minutes, and went home to his cramped studio apartment. He didn't think about Vivian Harper again. In his world, you helped people and moved on. That was just what you did. 4 days later, a courier showed up at the hotel looking for him. Inside the envelope was a handwritten note on expensive paper and a business card. "Dear Adrian, I wanted to thank you properly for your assistance the other night. If you ever need anything at all, please don't hesitate to reach out. Warmly, Vivian Harper." Adrian stared at the card. The name tickled something in his memory. During his break, he Googled her and nearly choked on his vending machine coffee. Vivian Harper. Real estate empire. Investments. Philanthropy. Net worth in the hundreds of millions. And she was giving him her personal number. He tucked the card in his wallet and tried to forget about it. What would someone like him even say to someone like her? But 2.5 weeks later, Vivian came back to the hotel. She walked in with a cane, perfectly dressed, and asked the front desk specifically for Adrian. "I wanted to see you again," she said simply when he came out. "To thank you face to face. Would you have coffee with me after your shift ends?" Adrian was completely confused, but he agreed. You didn't exactly say no to Vivian Harper. Coffee turned into dinner. Vivian was nothing like he expected. She told stories about building her company from scratch, about failing and starting over, about losing people she loved and finding the strength to continue. She didn't make him feel small or poor. She asked about his life, his classes, what kind of doctor he wanted to be. "Medical school must cost a fortune," she observed. Adrian gave a bitter laugh. "200,000 in loans so far, but it'll be worth it eventually. At least that's what I tell myself at 3 in the morning. "You'll be an exceptional doctor," Vivian said with absolute certainty. "You have something special. You actually see people, not just patients." They started meeting regularly after that. Once a week, sometimes more. Vivian would take him to restaurants Adrian couldn't pronounce, let alone afford. She'd ask about his studies, help him prepare for exams, listen to him complain about difficult professors. She became like family. A grandmother he'd never had, his classmates noticed. The jokes started small but got meaner. "Look at Adrian with his sugar grandma," someone whispered loud enough for him to hear. "Guess that's one way to pay off loans." Adrian ignored them. His friendship with Vivian wasn't like that. It was real. She was the only person who seemed to understand what he was trying to do with his life. Then her family found out. Her son Lawrence showed up at the restaurant one evening, his face purple with rage. "Mom, what the hell is going on here?" "I'm having dinner with a friend," Vivian said calmly. "Lawrence, this is Adrian. Adrian, my son Lawrence." Lawrence didn't offer his hand. "A friend? Mother, he's 50 years younger than you. People are talking. This looks absolutely ridiculous." "I don't care how it looks." Lawrence turned on Adrian. "What's your angle? How much has she given you already?" Adrian stood up. "I should leave." "Sit down, Adrian." Vivian's voice was ice. "Lawrence, you're embarrassing yourself. Adrian has never asked me for anything, not once." "Right. Poor medical student, rich old woman, this is textbook manipulation." Vivian's daughter Beatrice was slightly better when she called Adrian a few days later, but only slightly. "Look, I don't know what your game is," she said, sounding exhausted. "But my mother isn't well, she's vulnerable. Please just leave her alone." "I'm not playing any game," Adrian protested. "That's what you all say." The line went dead. Then the gossip sites found out. Photos of them having dinner showed up online with headlines that made Adrian's stomach turn. "Millionaire's mystery toy boy. True love or gold digger?" The comments were even worse. Adrian wanted to run, to end the friendship before it destroyed what was left of his reputation. But then Vivian called and asked him to meet her at her lawyer's office. Her voice sounded serious. "Important. I have a proposition for you," she said when he arrived. "It's going to sound absolutely insane, but I need you to hear the whole thing before you respond. Can you do that for me?" Adrian sat down in the leather chair, his heart pounding. He had no idea that in the next hour, everything he thought he knew about his life was about to completely fall apart. Vivian took a breath and said the words that would change everything. "Adrian, I need you to marry me." The lawyer, an older gentleman named Mr. Patterson, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He looked like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. Adrian understood the feeling. "Adrian," Vivian began, her hands folded neatly on the desk. "I'm going to tell you something that might upset you, but I need you to listen to everything before you say anything. Can you promise me that?" Adrian's mouth had gone completely dry. He managed a nod. "I'm dying." Vivian said it matter-of-factly, like she was commenting on the weather. "I have a progressive illness. The doctors say 6 months, maybe a year if I'm lucky." The words hit Adrian like a punch. "Vivian, no, I'm so sorry. Is there treatment? What can—" She held up one hand. "You promised to listen. There's more." She took a slow breath. "I've had a good life, Adrian. 71 years. I built something meaningful, traveled everywhere, loved deeply. But these past few months with you have reminded me what genuine connection feels like. Not people wanting my money, not business partners kissing up, not even my own children who only call when they need something, just honest friendship. Adrian felt tears threatening but blinked them back. My children will inherit my estate when I'm gone, Vivian continued. That's appropriate. It's theirs. But they'll also fight every single decision I make from now until I take my last breath. Every donation, every gift, every choice. They're already trying. Beatrice filed paperwork last month to have me declared mentally incompetent. That's insane. You're the sharpest person I know. A sad smile crossed Vivian's face. They see an elderly woman making unusual choices, befriending someone young enough to be her grandson. To them, it's proof of dementia. And legally, they might have a case. Any money I try to give you now, they'll fight to take back. Adrian felt sick. Vivian, I don't want your money. I've never wanted it. You don't owe me anything. I know that. That's exactly why I'm making this offer. She leaned forward. I want to help you, Adrian. Not out of guilt, but because you've given me something precious. You've treated me like a real person. You've made these final months bearable, and I want you to finish medical school without that crushing debt destroying you. I still don't understand. What offer? Vivian met his eyes directly. Marry me. The room tilted. Adrian gripped the armrest to keep from falling. You, what? I know exactly how it sounds, Vivian said quickly. But please listen. This would be completely practical. A marriage in name only. You'd have financial security, enough to finish school debt-free with money left over to start your career properly. I'd have companionship in my final months. Someone I trust. Someone who sees Vivian, not just a bank account. Marriage? But Mr. Patterson finally spoke up. It's the only legal protection available. If Mrs. Harper simply gives you money or pays your debts directly, her children will sue to recover it. They'll claim manipulation, undue influence, diminished mental capacity. But a spouse has legal protections. Marriage creates automatic rights that are much harder to contest. Adrian's head was spinning. People will say terrible things. They already are. They're already talking, Vivian interrupted. They've already decided what this relationship is. We might as well make it work for us. Listen, I'm not asking for romance. Nothing physical. Separate bedrooms, separate lives. You continue your studies. We'd simply be companions, friends, but with legal protection so my children can't undo what I'm trying to do for you. 6 months to a year, Adrian repeated, the words hollow. And then you'll be gone. Yes, and then you'll be free. Free from debt, free to become the doctor you're meant to be. Free to live your life without that weight crushing you. Vivian's voice softened. I know this is overwhelming. If you say no, I completely understand. We'll remain friends and I'll help you as much as the law allows. But Adrian, my time is running out, and I want to do something that matters with what's left. Adrian stared at the floor. His brain was screaming at him. This was crazy. Absolutely crazy. Marriage to a dying 71-year-old woman. What would people say? What would his mother think? But then he thought about the debt. $200,000 hanging over him like a guillotine. Working 3 jobs until his body gave out. The constant fear of having to drop out, of failing, of ending up exactly where he started. Can I have time to think? His voice came out barely above a whisper. Of course. Take a few days. Well, Vivian attempted a smile. Maybe not too many days, but enough time to make a real decision. Adrian left the office in a fog. He walked the city streets for hours, not seeing buildings or people. Just walking, he ended up outside the hospital where he did his rotations. Watching doctors move with purpose through the glass doors. That's what he wanted. That's all he'd ever wanted. But at what price? That night he called his mother. Mom, if you could solve all your problems, but you had to do something everyone would judge you for, would you do it? Long silence. Adrian, baby, what's happening? He told her everything. The whole impossible story. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. This woman, Vivian, his mother finally said. Is she good to you? Yes, she's wonderful. And you care about her? As a person, I mean. I really do. She's brilliant and kind, and she's taught me so much. Then who cares what anyone else thinks? His mother's voice was firm. Life is short, Adrian. Too short to live by other people's rules. If this helps you both, if nobody's getting hurt, then maybe it's the right thing. Sometimes life gives us strange chances. Sometimes we just need to be brave enough to take them. 3 days later, Adrian called Vivian back. His hands were shaking. Okay, I'll do it. The wedding was nothing like weddings are supposed to be. Just them, Mr. Patterson, and a judge in a courthouse. No flowers. No music, no guests. Just papers to sign and simple gold bands that felt heavier than they should. Thank you, Vivian whispered as she slipped the ring on his finger. You have no idea what this means. Adrian looked at the ring. It felt like a weight. Not physical, but symbolic. He was married. At 24, he was married to a 71-year-old millionaire with months to live. The news broke within hours. Someone at the courthouse sold the story. By evening, Adrian's phone was exploding. Screenshots from classmates. News headlines. Student weds dying millionaire. Ultimate gold digger strikes. Grandmother's boy toy. His email filled with interview requests, hate mail from strangers, even offers from tabloid shows. Adrian turned off his phone and tried not to be sick. Vivian's children were worse. Lawrence showed up at the hotel, his face twisted with fury. You disgusting vulture, he hissed. Enjoy your blood money while you can. We're contesting this marriage. We'll prove you manipulated her. We'll take back every single cent, Beatrice called, crying. How could you do this to her? She's sick and vulnerable, and you took advantage. I hope you can sleep at night. Adrian tried to explain, but they wouldn't hear it. To them, he was the villain. The con artist who'd stolen their inheritance. His classmates were just as bad. The jokes turned cruel. Nobody would study with him anymore. In the cafeteria, people whispered and laughed when he walked past. Someone wrote gold digger on his locker in permanent marker. Adrian wanted to quit everything. Drop out, divorce Vivian, disappear completely. But he'd made a promise, and Vivian needed him. The stress was affecting her health. She looked tired constantly, more fragile than before. I'm so sorry, she told him one evening. I didn't think the backlash would be this brutal. If you want to leave, I won't blame you. No, Adrian said firmly. We made an agreement. And more than that, you're my friend. I'm not abandoning you. They made it work somehow. Adrian moved into Vivian's enormous house, a mansion that felt like a museum. She gave him his own wing, his own bedroom, his own space. You need privacy, she insisted. This situation is strange enough already. They developed a routine. Adrian attended classes during the day. Vivian managed her business affairs. Evenings, they'd have dinner together, play chess, talk about everything and nothing. It was almost normal. Almost, except everyone was watching. Everyone was judging. Everyone was waiting for something to go wrong. What none of them knew, what Adrian himself had no idea about, was that Vivian Harper had one more secret, a massive one, and in exactly 7 days, Adrian would discover a truth that would completely shatter everything he thought he knew about his wife and this impossible marriage he'd agreed to. The silence was what Adrian noticed first. He woke up that first morning in the mansion to complete quiet. No car horns, no shouting neighbors, no police sirens cutting through the night. Just birds singing outside and the distant sound of wind in trees. His bedroom was ridiculous. Bigger than his entire previous apartment. The bed felt like sleeping on a cloud. The bathroom had a shower with so many settings he'd need a manual to figure them out. Everything smelled expensive and clean. Adrian sat on the edge of that enormous bed and stared at the wedding ring on his finger. This was real. This was actually his life now. He found Vivian in the sunroom having tea and reading the paper. She looked up and smiled when he walked in. Morning, did you sleep okay? Like I was dead, Adrian admitted. That bed is something else. Good. You needed real rest. You've been killing yourself with those jobs. She poured tea for him. I had my accountant handle your student loans, by the way. They're paid off. All of them. And there's an account set up for your expenses so you can focus on studying. Adrian's hands trembled as he took the cup. Vivian, I don't even know how to thank you. Don't thank me. Just become the doctor you're meant to be. That's all I want. She went back to her paper like she'd just told him the weather forecast. I have meetings today. Business things. Make yourself at home. There's a library upstairs if you want to study. Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper, will make you lunch. I should be back around 5, and that was it. She treated him like a roommate. A friend sharing space. Not a husband in any traditional sense, but not a stranger either. It was weird. But Adrian found himself grateful for how normal she kept things. The first few days blurred together. Adrian went to classes where people still whispered and stared. But something had shifted. Without debt crushing him, without working himself to exhaustion, he could actually focus. His grades had been slipping. Now they started climbing again. He could stay late to ask questions. He could actually read the textbooks instead of just skimming them half asleep. Evenings with Vivian became the best part of his day. She was endlessly fascinating. She'd lived through decades of history, met incredible people. She told him about meeting presidents and movie stars, about business deals that succeeded and failed spectacularly, about the husband she'd loved and lost 20 years before. Robert was a good man, she said one night, her voice distant with memory. We built everything together, you know. People think I did it alone, but he was my partner, my equal. When he died, I almost gave up. But then I realized the best way to honor him was to keep building, make our dream even bigger. You must miss him every day, Adrian said softly. I do. But life doesn't stop for grief. We can't pause just because we're hurting. We have to keep moving, she smiled sadly. That's the hardest lesson. Adrian genuinely enjoyed her company. She was sharp, funny, challenging. They'd debate medical ethics for hours, argue about books, discuss politics. It was the kind of conversation Adrian had always wanted but rarely found. But something strange was happening. Something that didn't quite add up. Every night around 9, Vivian would excuse herself. I'm tired, she'd say. Think I'll turn in. And she'd disappear into the east wing of the mansion, the section she'd specifically asked him not to go into. He'd respected that boundary completely. The thing was, Vivian never actually seemed tired. Her health, which was supposed to be declining, seemed fine. Better than fine. She had more energy now than when they'd first met. Her color was good. Her breathing easy. She took long walks through the garden. She worked full business days without showing fatigue. Adrian tried to convince himself he was being paranoid. Terminal illnesses weren't always straightforward, right? There could be good periods mixed with bad ones. But his medical training was screaming that something didn't make sense. On the 4th night, he heard sounds from the east wing. Not loud, but distinct. Beeping noises. Equipment running. It reminded him of the hospital. On the 5th night, he saw deliveries coming to a side entrance. Medical supplies, he was almost certain. Boxes with labels he recognized from his clinical work. On the 6th night, he tried asking casually, How are you feeling? Health-wise, I mean. Are you having any symptoms? Vivian's answer was vague. Oh, you know. Some days better than others. Today was good. Are you keeping up with your treatments? Seeing your doctors? Something flickered in her eyes. I'm managing my care. Don't worry about me. You focus on school. It was the 7th night when everything exploded. Adrian couldn't sleep. His mind wouldn't stop racing with questions and doubts. What if Vivian wasn't actually sick? What if this was all some elaborate test? Or what if she was sicker than she let on, hiding her suffering to seem strong? He got out of bed and wandered the dark hallways. It was nearly midnight. The mansion was mostly dark except for small lights along the floor. He found himself walking toward the east wing without really deciding to. He'd respected her privacy all week, but something was pulling him forward. He needed to understand the door was usually locked. But tonight it stood slightly open. Light spilled into the dark hallway. Adrian stood there debating with himself. He could turn around, go back to bed, mind his own business. That would be the respectful choice. But he was a medical student. He was being trained to investigate, to ask questions, to find answers, and beyond that he cared about Vivian. If something was wrong, he wanted to help. He pushed the door open slowly. The hallway beyond looked nothing like the rest of the house. White walls, tile floors, fluorescent lighting. It looked like a hospital corridor. Adrian's heart pounded as he moved forward. Several doors lined the hallway. Most were closed, but one at the end stood open, bright light pouring out. He could hear Vivian's voice talking to someone, or maybe to herself. He approached carefully, quietly, until he could see into the room. What he saw made him freeze completely. A laboratory, a full professional medical research lab, equipment he recognized from school, centrifuges, microscopes, refrigeration units, computers showing complex data, charts covered in medical terminology and molecular structures, shelves lined with chemicals and equipment, research papers everywhere, and there in the middle of it all stood Vivian in a white lab coat looking through a microscope. No, that's still not right, she was muttering. The molecular structure is off. Maybe if I adjust the composition. Adrian must have made a sound because Vivian suddenly looked up. When she saw him in the doorway, all color drained from her face. Adrian, she breathed. What are you doing here? He stared at her. At the lab. At everything he couldn't understand. What is this? What's going on? Vivian straightened up slowly, carefully, like someone caught doing something forbidden. I can explain this. You're not sick. Adrian's voice came out harsher than he meant. Are you? This whole time you've been lying. It's more complicated than that. Yes or no, Vivian? Are you dying? Silence stretched between them like a physical thing. Vivian's shoulders sagged. She suddenly looked all 71 years. No, she finally whispered. I'm not dying. Adrian felt like someone had punched him in the chest, so it was all fake. The illness, the marriage, everything. What am I to you, some kind of experiment? Please just let me explain. It's not what you think. Then what is it? Adrian gestured wildly at the lab. What is all this? Why did you lie to me? Vivian took off her lab coat slowly, folding it carefully like she was buying time. When she looked at Adrian again, her eyes held something he'd never seen before. Not manipulation, desperation. You're right to be angry, she said quietly. I lied about being sick, but everything else was real. The friendship, the respect, the marriage, all of it was real. And I did it for one reason. She gestured at the equipment around them. I'm trying to save lives, Adrian. And I needed someone I could trust completely. Someone with medical knowledge and, more importantly, someone with a genuinely good heart. I don't understand any of this. Sit down, Vivian said, pulling out 2 chairs. Let me tell you the truth. The whole truth. And after you hear it, if you want to leave, to divorce me, to never speak to me again, I'll understand completely. But please just hear me out first. Adrian's mind was chaos, but he sat down. After everything that had happened, he deserved answers. And despite the anger, despite feeling betrayed, he still wanted to hear what Vivian had to say. Whatever the truth was, it was about to change absolutely everything. Vivian took a long, slow breath before she started. 20 years ago, my husband Robert died. I told you that part. What I didn't tell you was how. She walked to one of the cabinets and pulled out a framed photograph. A handsome man in his 50s with his arm around a younger Vivian. They looked deeply in love. Robert had something called Kaufman syndrome. Have you heard of it? Adrian searched his memory. Maybe? It's a rare neurological disease, right? Progressive. Affects motor control and cognitive function. There's no cure. Exactly, no cure. Not enough patients for drug companies to bother researching it. They call it an orphan disease. Vivian's voice cracked slightly. Robert was diagnosed at 45. We had 10 years after that. I watched him deteriorate slowly, his hands shaking first. Then he couldn't walk without help. Near the end, he couldn't even speak clearly anymore. But his mind was still there. His brilliant mind trapped inside a body that wouldn't work. She paused, collecting herself. I spent millions trying to help him. The best doctor's money could buy. Experimental treatments, everything, nothing worked. When he died, I made a promise to myself. I would find a cure. Too late for Robert, but not too late for everyone else suffering from this disease. So you built all this? Adrian said, gesturing around the laboratory. Yes, but it wasn't simple. The FDA has incredibly strict regulations about medical research. Clinical trials take years, sometimes decades. I didn't have that kind of time. I'm 71. If I went through proper channels, I'd be dead before we made any progress. Vivian's eyes blazed with intensity. So I did something illegal. I built a private research facility, hired scientists under the table. I've been running experiments that would never get approved officially. Adrian's medical training fought against his emotions. Vivian, that's incredibly dangerous. Those regulations exist for good reasons. People could get hurt, that I know the risks. But do you know how many people die from Kaufman syndrome every year, while researchers wait for funding? While pharmaceutical companies decide it's not profitable enough to bother with? Hundreds die, maybe thousands who never even get properly diagnosed. Vivian sat across from him. I couldn't just sit back and watch it happen. Not when I had the money and resources to actually do something. But what does any of this have to do with me? With our marriage? I'm getting there. Vivian leaned forward. 6 months ago, I had a real breakthrough. A genuine one. I developed a treatment that showed incredible promise in laboratory tests. But to move forward, I needed someone with current medical knowledge, someone who could understand the research, help me refine it, who could eventually take it public when the time was right. You could have hired someone, a real researcher with credentials. I tried. But anyone I hired would be breaking the law, too. They'd risk their medical licenses, their entire careers. And more importantly, I couldn't trust them not to steal the research and sell it to the highest bidder. This cure could be worth billions, Adrian. Billions. The wrong person would patent it and price it so high only wealthy people could afford it. That's not what Robert would have wanted. It's not what I want, understanding started to dawn. So you needed someone you could trust. Yes, but more than that, I needed someone who could be legally protected. Someone who couldn't be sued or prosecuted for my actions. Someone who could inherit the research and continue the work after I'm gone. Vivian met his eyes directly. A spouse has legal protections that an employee or partner doesn't. And critically, I needed to know the person had the right character, that they wouldn't be corrupted by money or fame, that they genuinely cared about helping people, above everything else. So the collapse at the hotel was completely real, Vivian said quickly. I genuinely forgot to eat that day. But your response, Adrian, the way you helped me without thinking twice, without expecting anything, that's when I knew. I started researching your background. I hired investigators to look into your character, your history. Everything I learned confirmed what I'd seen. You were the right person. You've been testing me this whole time, Adrian said slowly. The friendship, the dinners, everything. You were checking me out. At first, yes. But Adrian, it became genuine. I really do enjoy your company. You remind me so much of Robert. That same kindness, that same drive to help people. When I proposed marriage, it wasn't just strategy. I genuinely wanted you as a partner in this, someone to share the work with. Adrian stood and paced the laboratory. His emotions were a complete mess. Anger at the deception, understanding of her motivation, confusion about what any of this meant going forward. Why not just tell me the truth from the start? Would you have believed me? Some crazy old woman claiming she's secretly curing diseases in her mansion? You would have thought I was delusional, or you might have reported me to the authorities. Vivian's voice softened. I needed to know you first, to earn your trust. And yes, I needed to manipulate the situation so you'd have a reason to agree. The fake terminal illness? Yes. I'm not proud of that lie, Adrian. It's the one thing I truly regret about all this. But I was desperate. Time is running out, not because I'm dying, but because I'm getting old. My hands aren't as steady anymore. My eyes aren't as sharp. I need help, and I need it from someone I can trust with everything. Adrian looked at all the research covering the walls. Complex formulas, test results, years of dedicated work. Show me what you've been doing. Vivian's face lit up like the sun. She spent the next hour walking him through her research. Adrian's medical knowledge was barely enough to follow along, but he understood enough. What she'd accomplished was brilliant, revolutionary. The treatment targeted the genetic markers of Kaufman syndrome at a molecular level, potentially stopping the disease's progression or even reversing damage already done. This is amazing, Adrian breathed. Vivian, if this actually works, if it works, we could save thousands of lives. Maybe more. The same approach might apply to other genetic disorders too. Vivian pulled a chair next to his. But I can't do it alone anymore. I need help with the research. I need someone who can eventually take this public properly, who can navigate FDA approval the right way. I need you, Adrian. I'm just a student. I don't know anything about research or genetics at this level. You'll learn. You're intelligent, you're dedicated, and most importantly, you care. That matters more than any degree. Vivian placed her hand on his. I know I lied to you. I know I manipulated this entire situation, and if you want to leave, I completely understand. I'll still pay off your debts like I promised. I'll give you everything I offered. But Adrian, please consider staying, not as my dying wife's caretaker, but as my actual research partner. Adrian looked around the laboratory, then back at Vivian. Her face showed hope mixed with resignation, ready to accept whatever he decided. My grandmother died from a rare disease, Adrian said quietly. The doctors couldn't do anything. Not enough research, they said. Not enough funding. I was 12 and I had to watch her suffer for 2 years. He met Vivian's eyes. That's part of why I wanted to become a doctor, to help people the medical system ignores. I didn't know that, Vivian whispered. I never mentioned it. Adrian took a deep breath. What you did, lying to me, manipulating me into this marriage that wasn't okay. I'm really angry about that. Genuinely furious. I understand. But what you're trying to accomplish here, this cure you're developing, it could actually save people. People like my grandmother. People like Robert. Adrian ran his hand through his hair. Every logical part of my brain is screaming at me to walk away, but, Vivian's voice was barely audible. But I keep thinking about all the people suffering right now. All the families watching their loved ones decline with no hope, just like you watched Robert. Just like I watched my grandmother. Adrian looked at the years of research surrounding them. If I walk away, what happens to this? I continue working alone until I physically can't anymore. Then it probably dies with me. My children don't understand any of this. They'd shut it down immediately. Maybe sell the research to someone who'd bury it forever. That can't happen, Adrian said firmly. He turned to face Vivian. Okay, I'll stay. I'll help you with this research. But I have one absolute condition. Name it. No more lies ever. If we're going to be real partners, then complete honesty from now on. About the research, about the risks, about everything. Deal? Vivian stood and extended her hand. Complete honesty. I promise. Partners? Adrian shook her hand and found himself smiling despite everything. Partners. Though you realize we're still technically married, right? This has to be the strangest research partnership in history. Vivian laughed, a genuine laugh that echoed through the laboratory. Who cares what anyone thinks anymore? We're going to save lives, Adrian. That's all that actually matters. Standing there in that secret laboratory surrounded by years of research and hope, Adrian realized his life had just taken an impossible turn. He'd entered this mansion thinking he was helping a dying woman find peace. Instead, he'd become part of something potentially world-changing. But there was still so much he didn't know. So many questions about the research, the legal risks, what came next. As Vivian began explaining her next steps, Adrian settled in for what would be a very long night. His education was about to expand far beyond anything medical school could teach. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he couldn't help wondering what other surprises Vivian Harper might still have waiting. The next few weeks were both the hardest and most rewarding of Adrian's entire life. He was living two completely separate existences. During the day, he was still a medical student attending classes and doing rotations. His classmates still whispered behind his back, still made cruel jokes about his marriage to Vivian. He'd learned to tune it all out. Let them believe whatever they wanted. He knew the real truth now. But at night, he transformed into something else entirely. A research assistant. A student of genetics and molecular biology. A partner in work that could revolutionize medicine. Vivian was a demanding teacher. She expected him to read complex journal articles, understand concepts that made his brain hurt, challenge her theories when something didn't make sense. At first, Adrian felt completely overwhelmed. He was studying to be a regular doctor, not a research scientist. The level Vivian operated at was far beyond anything medical school covered. Stop doubting yourself, Vivian would say whenever he got frustrated. You have the foundation, everything else is just learning. And you learn incredibly fast. She was right. Adrian found himself absorbing information at a shocking rate. Maybe because he wasn't exhausted anymore. Maybe because he was passionate about the work. Or maybe Vivian was just an exceptional teacher. They developed a rhythm. Evenings in the lab together, Vivian explaining her previous research while Adrian helped to design new experiments. Weekends when he didn't have classes, they'd work for hours, sometimes forgetting to eat until Mrs. Chen came and physically dragged them away. You two are going to kill yourselves working like this, the housekeeper scolded. What's the point of curing diseases if you die from exhaustion first? But Adrian had never felt more alive. For the first time since starting medical school, he felt like he was making an actual difference, not just learning about medicine in theory, but actively contributing to something real and meaningful. There were failures, of course. Experiments that didn't work. Theories that fell apart. Moments of crushing disappointment when they thought they'd achieved a breakthrough, only to find a critical flaw. One night, after a particularly devastating failed test, Vivian sat down heavily and put her head in her hands. What if I'm wrong about all of this? What if these 20 years of work amount to nothing? Adrian, who'd learned so much from her strength, found himself being the encouraging one. Then we try something different. We adjust the approach, change the formula. Robert wouldn't want you to give up. and neither do all the people out there who need this cure. Vivian looked up with tears in her eyes. When did you become so wise? I learned from the best, Adrian said with a smile. Around week 6, things shifted unexpectedly. Lawrence showed up at the mansion unannounced. Adrian answered the door. I need to speak with my mother, Lawrence said. His tone was less hostile than before, but still cold. She's working. I can get her if... I know about the laboratory, Lawrence interrupted. I've known for months. I hired investigators. Adrian's blood turned to ice. Lawrence, you can't... Relax, I'm not going to report her. Lawrence pushed past him into the house. But we need to talk. All three of us. Now. The conversation that followed was intense. Lawrence revealed he'd been monitoring Vivian for years, worried about her mental state, her strange behavior, the money disappearing into mysterious projects. I thought you were scamming her, Lawrence admitted, looking at Adrian. I genuinely believed this kid was taking advantage. That's why I fought the marriage so hard. And now? Vivian asked carefully. Now I know you're doing something highly illegal that could destroy everything our family built. Lawrence's voice rose. Mother, do you understand what could happen if the FDA discovers this? If the medical board investigates? You could go to prison. The company could be sued into bankruptcy. I know the risks, Vivian said calmly. Do you? Because you're gambling with your entire legacy. With Dad's legacy, with everything you both worked to build. And for what? Research that might not even succeed? Adrian found himself speaking up. It will succeed. I've reviewed the data. What Vivian's accomplished here is genuinely revolutionary. Lawrence turned on him. You're a medical student. What do you actually know about genetic research? More than you'd think. And I know enough to recognize brilliance when I see it. Adrian met his eyes. Your mother isn't crazy. She's trying to help people that the entire medical establishment has given up on. By breaking federal law. Yes, Vivian said simply. By breaking the law. And I'd do it again without hesitation. Lawrence, your father died because the system failed him. Failed us. I won't let that happen to other families if I have the power to prevent it. The argument lasted for hours. Beatrice arrived halfway through, equally upset but slightly more understanding. Eventually, they reached an uneasy compromise. Vivian's children wouldn't report the illegal research, but they wanted her to start planning how to legitimize it eventually, how to bring it into proper channels before she got caught. Work with Adrian, Beatrice suggested. He'll be a licensed doctor soon. He can be the public face when the time comes. That provides some legal protection. It wasn't the resolution anyone wanted, but it was something. After her children left, Vivian looked completely drained. They're not entirely wrong, she admitted. We do need to think about legitimizing this work eventually. Eventually, Adrian agreed. But first, we need to make absolutely sure it works. The breakthrough came 3 months into their partnership. Adrian was reviewing older test results when he noticed something Vivian had overlooked. A small anomaly in the data that might be significant. Vivian, look at this, he said, pulling up files. In test batch 7, the cellular response was completely different from all the others. What if They worked through the entire night redesigning the treatment based on Adrian's observation. When they tested it the next day, the results exceeded their wildest hopes. The treatment not only stopped Kaufman syndrome's progression in lab samples, but actually began repairing cellular damage that had already occurred. Vivian stared at the data with tears streaming down her face. Robert, she whispered. We actually did it. Adrian felt his own eyes watering. 20 years of work. Years of grief and determination and illegal research and desperate hope. And it was finally paying off, but there was still so much left to do. More testing, more data, more proof. They needed to figure out how to bring this treatment into the legitimate medical world without Vivian facing criminal prosecution. We'll figure it out, Adrian said. Together, Vivian pulled him into a tight embrace. Not an employer hugging an employee, but a genuine embrace between two people who'd become true partners and real friends. Over the next year, they worked on perfecting the treatment while slowly building a path toward legitimacy. Adrian graduated from medical school at the top of his class. The whispers and jokes never really stopped, but he'd learned to ignore them completely. He knew what he and Vivian were accomplishing together. They eventually decided to annul the marriage. It had served its legal purpose, and honestly, it was just complicating their actual work. The annulment was quiet and uncontested. The media barely noticed. Does this mean we're not partners anymore? Vivian asked with a slight smile. Don't be ridiculous, Adrian replied. We're partners, just not the married kind. With Adrian now a licensed doctor, they could begin legitimizing the research properly. It would take years. Clinical trials, FDA reviews, endless bureaucratic obstacles, but they had a head start most researchers could only dream of. Vivian's health actually did start declining around her 75th birthday. Nothing terminal, just normal aging. Her hands shook more, she tired more easily. But her mind stayed sharp, and she continued contributing to the research even as Adrian gradually took on more of the practical work. One evening in the laboratory that had become their second home, Vivian turned to Adrian. Do you regret it? Saying yes to my insane proposal? Adrian thought about everything. The judgment, the isolation, the strange journey. No, he said honestly. I found my purpose. And I found a true friend. That's worth more than I can express. Even though I lied to you, even though you lied. Though I'm still a little annoyed about that, he added with a grin. Vivian laughed. That's fair. She passed away peacefully in her sleep at 76, just as they were preparing to submit their research for FDA approval. She lived long enough to see the treatment prove successful in preliminary trials, long enough to know her life's work would continue. Her funeral was well attended. Lawrence and Beatrice gave beautiful speeches about their mother's business accomplishments and charitable work. But it was Adrian who spoke about her real legacy, about the countless hours in the laboratory, the determination to help people others had forgotten, the brilliance that existed outside traditional channels. Vivian Harper changed my life, Adrian said from the podium. Not with her money, though that helped. Not with her connections, though those opened doors. She changed my life by showing me that sometimes doing the right thing is also the hardest thing, that sometimes you have to break unjust rules to fix a broken system, and that true partnership means seeing someone not for who they appear to be, but for who they actually are. Vivian's will left the research foundation entirely to Adrian. Lawrence and Beatrice inherited the business empire and the mansion, but the laboratory, the research, the years of work, that all went to Adrian. Along with enough funding to see the project through to completion. It took 3 more years, but the treatment for Kaufman syndrome eventually received full FDA approval. The first patients were successfully treated. Lives were saved. Families were given hope where none had existed before. Adrian established the Vivian Harper Medical Research Foundation, dedicated to finding treatments for orphan diseases pharmaceutical companies ignored. Lawrence and Beatrice, who'd finally understood their mother's vision, served on the board of directors. At the press conference announcing the breakthrough, a reporter asked about his unusual relationship with Vivian. You married her, worked with her, inherited her research. Some people still claim you were just after her money. What's your response? Adrian smiled, thinking of late nights in the laboratory, of chess games and debates, of a friendship that had defied all explanation. I'd say that Vivian Harper saw something in me before I saw it in myself. She gave me the chance to be part of something bigger than my own life. Yes, I gained tremendously from knowing her. But the real winners are the thousands of people who now have access to a treatment that didn't exist before. If that makes me a gold digger, then I'll wear that label with pride. The reporter looked taken aback, but others in the room applauded. Walking out of that press conference, Adrian thought about how drastically his life had changed since that night in the hotel lobby. He'd been an exhausted student working 3 jobs, drowning in debt, barely surviving. Now he was Dr. Adrian Cole, director of a groundbreaking research foundation, making a genuine difference in the world. All because a 71-year-old woman had collapsed in front of him, and he'd simply chosen to help. Sometimes life gives you strange opportunities, his mother had said. Sometimes you just need to be brave enough to take them. Adrian had been brave. Vivian had been brilliant. Together, they'd proven that the most unlikely partnerships could create the most extraordinary results. 7 days after marrying a millionaire, he'd been shocked by what he discovered. But that shock had led to understanding, to purpose, to a legacy that would outlive them both. In the end, maybe that was what genuine connection really meant. Not romance or convention, but 2 people choosing to build something meaningful together, whatever form that took. And that was a story genuinely worth telling.